Welcome to Identity and Access Management Crashcasts. I'm your host, Sheila, and today we're diving into OpenID Connect, adding an identity layer to OAuth 2.0. Joining me, as always, is our IAM expert, Victor. Hi, Victor.
Hello, Sheila, and hello to all our listeners. I'm excited to explore OpenID Connect with you today.
Before we begin, listeners should be familiar with OAuth 2.0 and basic authentication concepts. Today, we'll cover the history of OpenID Connect, its relationship with OAuth 2.0, key components, and real-world implementations. But first, let's start with a quiz question. What's the primary difference between authentication and authorization in the context of identity management?
That's an excellent question, Sheila. It really gets to the heart of why OpenID Connect was developed. Listeners, take a moment to think about it. Consider what happens when you log into a website and then use different features on that site. Are these actions the same, or do they serve different purposes?
Great setup, Victor. Now, let's dive into OpenID Connect. Can you give us a brief history and explain why it was created?
Certainly. OpenID Connect was developed to address a gap in OAuth 2.0. While OAuth 2.0 is great for authorization, it doesn't inherently provide a standard way to get identity information about the user. OpenID Connect was created in 2014 to add an identity layer on top of OAuth 2.0, allowing for both authentication and authorization in a standardized manner.
That's interesting. So, OpenID Connect builds on OAuth 2.0. Can you explain how it extends OAuth 2.0?
Absolutely. OpenID Connect adds a new token type called an ID token, which is a JSON Web Token, or JWT. A JWT is a secure way of transmitting information between parties as a JSON object. This ID token contains claims about the authenticated user. OpenID Connect also introduces standard endpoints and scopes specifically for identity-related information. This allows applications to not only get access tokens for authorization, but also verify the identity of the user.
I see. So, if I understand correctly, OpenID Connect is like adding a passport system to OAuth 2.0 S visa system. The passport, ID token, proves who you are, while the visa, access token, authorizes what you can do. Is that a fair analogy?
That's an excellent analogy, Sheila. It perfectly captures the essence of how OpenID Connect complements OAuth 2.0. The ID token, passport, provides identity information, while the access token, visa, grants access to resources.
Great! Now that we've established that analogy, let's dive a bit deeper. Can you explain what claims are in the context of OpenID Connect?
Certainly. Claims are pieces of information about the user or the authentication event. They're included in the ID token, which we can think of as our digital passport. Common claims include the user's name, email, and when they were authenticated. For example, a claim might say name, John Doe, or email, john@example.com. OpenID Connect defines a set of standard claims, but providers can also include custom claims to provide additional information.
That's helpful. How do these claims relate to scopes in OpenID Connect?
Good question. Scopes in OpenID Connect are used to request specific sets of claims. For example, the profile scope might request access to the user's name, picture, and other profile information. The email scope would request access to the user's email address. This allows applications to request only the information they need.
I see. So, applications can be more specific about what user information they need. Speaking of applications, can you give us an example of a real-world implementation of OpenID Connect?
Absolutely. One of the most common implementations you might encounter is Google Sign-In. When you see a Sign In with Google button on a website, that's often using OpenID Connect. Google acts as the identity provider, authenticating the user and providing identity information to the application.
That's a great example. Now, how does OpenID Connect compare to other identity technologies like SAML?
While both OpenID Connect and SAML, Security Assertion Markup Language, are used for authentication and single sign-on, OpenID Connect is generally considered more modern and web-friendly. It uses JSON and is designed to work well with RESTful APIs. which are a way for web services to communicate over the Internet, making it easier to implement in modern web and mobile applications. SAML, on the other hand, uses XML and is more common in enterprise environments.
Interesting comparison. Are there any common misunderstandings or pitfalls when implementing OpenID Connect that our listeners should be aware of?
One common mistake is not properly validating the ID token. It's crucial to verify the token's signature, expiration time, and intended audience to prevent security vulnerabilities. Another pitfall is confusing the ID token with the access token. Remember, the ID token is for authentication, while the access token is for authorization.
Those are important points to keep in mind. Before we wrap up, let's reveal the answer to our quiz question. Victor, would you like to do the honors?
Certainly. The primary difference between authentication and authorization is that authentication verifies who someone is, while authorization determines what they're allowed to do. In the context of OpenID Connect, the ID token handles authentication, proving the user's identity, while the access token from OAuth 2.0 handles authorization, granting access to specific resources.
Excellent explanation, Victor. To summarize today's episode, OpenID Connect adds an identity layer to OAuth 2.0, introducing ID tokens for authentication alongside access tokens for authorization. It uses claims to provide user information and scopes to request specific sets of claims. Real-world implementations like Google Sign-in are common, and while it's similar to technologies like SAML, OpenID Connect is more suited for modern web and mobile applications.
Great summary, Sheila. I'd just add that proper implementation and security considerations are crucial when working with OpenID Connect.
Absolutely, Victor. Thank you for sharing your expertise with us today. Listeners, if you found this episode helpful, please subscribe to Identity and Access Management Crashcasts and leave us a rating. Your support helps us continue providing valuable content. Until next time, keep your identities secure and your access well managed.